5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, when is the time? When is the time? Well, in your written statement, you say, now is not the time to pull back on masking, physical distancing, and avoiding congregate settings. When is the time? When do Americans get their freedom back? Can you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry. When we get the level of infection in this country low enough that it is not a really high threat.
What is low enough? Give me a number. What, I mean, we had 15 days to slow the spread, turned into 1 year of lost liberty. What metrics, what measures, what has to happen before Americans get their freedoms back?
My message, Congressman Jordan, is to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as we possibly can to get the level of infection in this country low that it is no longer a threat. That is when. And I believe when that happens, you will see.
What determines when?
I'm sorry.
What? What measure? What, I mean, are we just going to continue this forever, or when do we get to the point? What measure? What standard? What objective outcome do we have to reach before Americans get their liberty and freedoms back?
You know, you're indicating liberty and freedom. I look at it as a public health measure to prevent people from dying and going to the hospital.
You don't think Americans' liberties have been threatened the last year, Dr. Fauci? They've been assaulted. Their liberties have.
I don't look at this as a liberty thing, Congressman Jordan.
Well, that's
I look
obvious.
At this as a public health thing.
But
I disagree with you on that.
You think the Constitution is suspended during a virus, during a pandemic? It's certainly not.
This will end for sure when we get the level of infection very low. It is now at such a high level, there's a threat again of major surges.
Dr. Fauci, over the last year, Americans' First Amendment rights have been completely attacked. Your right to go to church, your right to assemble, your right to petition your government, freedom of the press, freedom of speech have all been assaulted. I mean, for a year now, Americans haven't been able to go to church. Even today, when they go to church, they're limited in the size of worshipers who can meet. Your right to assemble? Oh, my goodness. We had a curfew last fall in Ohio. You had to be in your home at 10. In Pennsylvania, you had to be in your home. When you're in your home, you had to wear a mask. In Vermont, when you were in your home, you didn't have to wear a mask, Dr. Fauci, because you weren't allowed to have people over to your house.
Yeah, Congressman Jordan.
Your ability to petition your government, for a year, American citizens haven't been able to come to their capital to petition their government, to talk to their representatives, and freedom of the press. These very pictures that Representative Scalise just showed you and talked about, guess what? The press isn't allowed in those facilities. The press is not, the Biden administration will not let the press in there. And certainly freedom of speech. I mean, freedom, governor of our third largest state meets with physicians, and that video is censored because they dare to disagree with Dr. Fauci. So I just want to know, when do Americans get their First Amendment liberties back?
You know, I don't think anything was censored because they felt they couldn't disagree with me. I think you're making this a personal thing, and it isn't.
It's not a personal thing.
No, you are. That is exactly what you're doing.
No, your recommendations carry a lot of weight, Dr. Fauci. We just had the chair of the Financial Services Committee said she loves you and you're the greatest thing in the world.
My recommendations are consistent.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, it's my
Now,
time.
could I answer the question, please? My recommendations are not a personal recommendation. It's based on the CDC guidance, which is
and I'm asking the
question:
what measures have to be attained before Americans get their First Amendment liberties back?
I just told you that.
No, you haven't given anything specific. You said we hope when this. Tell me specifically.
Right now, we have about 60,000 infections a day, which is a very large risk for a surge. We're not talking about liberties. We're talking about a pandemic that has killed 560,000 Americans.
That's
what we're talking about.
And I don't disagree with that. And I understand how serious that is. But I also understand it's pretty serious when businesses have been shut down. People can't go to church. People can't assemble in their own homes with their friends, with their families. People can't go to a loved one's funeral. People can't get to their government, petition their representative to redress their grievances. Right. I also understand the First Amendment's pretty darn important. And it's been a year. And I want to know when Americans will get those First Amendment liberties back.
Right. You just said people cannot assemble in their own homes. They can. That's a CDC recommendation for vaccinated
Not last
people.
fall they couldn't.
I didn't hear.
Not last fall they couldn't.
I didn't hear what he said.
The gentleman's time has expired. I'll give you one instance of when we can get our liberties back. It's when 90% of the members of the United States Congress get vaccinated.
Well, I want to know if that's what Dr. Fauci, is it 90%,
That's what
Dr. Fauci? Is it 90%? That's what I'd like to know. Give us some objective standards versus when certain things get reached, we might be able to get back to having our liberty. When? What are the numbers?
Well,
You're going to see a gradual, right now we're at an unacceptably high level. On a daily basis, it's unacceptably high, regardless of who you are. What you're going to see as more and more people get vaccinated, and we get over 3 million people a day, you're going to see the level of infection come down, and gradually there will be more flexibility for doing the things that you're talking about.
Where does it get to? When it comes down, what number do we get our liberties back? Tell me the number. Tell me the number.
When 90% of the members of Congress get vaccinated.
But you're not a doctor, Mr. Clyburn. He is. What is the number?
I can't
Thank
give...
you for recognizing me, Mr. Clyburn. Thank you.
Chair
for
now
giving me the
recognizes
time.
for 5
I'd
minutes.
like my question
Ms.
answered.
Maloney.
I don't want.
Reclaiming my
I
time.
want a
Reclaiming my time.
Regular order.
No,
Just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to answer my question. The American people want Dr. Fauci to answer the
Well-
question. What does it have to be?
Sir. You need to respect the chair and shut your mouth.
Don't worry about this. We're going to handle this. And I think Mr. Jordan knows me very well. And he knows full well that we're going to handle this. Your time has expired, and the chair now recognizes
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this important hearing, and I thank all of their panelists for their dedication to public health and their being here with us today. I'd like to ask, well, first I'd like to thank Dr. Fauci for serving, 7 presidents, selflessly trying to find answers to...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rosen, 4 years ago on January 6, 2017, was it appropriate for Democrats to object to the 2016 presidential election results?
Congressman, I think the things that are appropriate or inappropriate for Congress to do are that all members, of course, and all the rest of us have to adhere to the Constitution. And so I'm going to say that that's an issue for you as members of Congress to assess.
You're a former acting attorney general, and we appreciate your service to the country. I'm just asking, was it okay for them to? They've told us we're not allowed to object. We weren't allowed to object on January 6, 2021. In fact, you're not even allowed to co-sponsor legislation that Democrats introduced if you did object to accepting and counting the electors on January 6, 2021. I'm just wanting your thoughts on, was it okay for Democrats to do that on January 6, 2017?
What I would hope is people of all parties, all political perspectives, would respect the Constitution, our system of government, and the rule of law.
And does the Constitution allow members to object to the Electoral College results on January 6 after a presidential election?
My understanding is that it does.
It does, right. And Democrats did it. I mean, we had Jim McGovern, the Democrat chairman of the Rules Committee. He objected to the very first state called. He objected to Alabama back on January 6, 2017. President Trump won by 30 points. Mr. Raskin objected to Florida. Mrs. Waters objected to Wyoming, maybe the only state that President Trump won by more than he won Alabama. She objected to Wyoming. And you're saying that was okay for Democrats to do? Mr. Rosen, that was fine?
Oh, I'm sorry, Congress. I didn't understand if you were asking me to respond to that. Again, I mean, I think
is it okay for Jim McGovern, the Democrat member of Congress, to object to Alabama on January 6, 2017? Is that all right? He's allowed to do that, right?
I think if members are adhering to their constitutional rights and roles and responsibilities, that's, again, a question for all the folks in Congress.
And Ms. Waters can object to Wyoming, even though President Trump won Wyoming by like 40 points. She can object to that if she wants to, right?
Well, at least the Constitution allows members of Congress to raise objections.
Yeah. We've heard a lot of talk from the Democrats about revisionist history and and the big lie. I just think it's important that we've had members, Democrat members of Congress, tell us that we weren't allowed to object. That somehow we were trying to overturn the will of the American people, even though we objected to states like Pennsylvania, for example, where they, I believe, in an unconstitutional fashion, changed their election laws in the run-up to the election. But somehow they're allowed to object to Alabama, they're allowed to object to Wyoming, they're allowed to object to Florida, but we're not allowed to object. I fail to see the logic there. How about the previous gentleman from Virginia talked about brutality, talked about statements. I just want to read you a couple statements here. Well, no, let me ask you this question first. Was the 2016 election stolen?
I do not know of evidence that would say it was. I think you're alluding to a troublesome thing about the legitimacy of our past elections, sometimes governor's races being called into question. And I think it's really necessary and important for all of us to find ways to restore our citizens' faith in the electoral process and in our representative system of government.
Secretary Clinton said on a speaking tour, May 2019, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you. September 2019, she said on CBS Sunday Morning that President Trump was an illegitimate president. On October 2020, just a month before our last presidential election, she was referring to the 2016 presidential election, and she said it was stolen from her. Is she wrong?
She is wrong.
Yeah, she is wrong, because the election was valid in 2016. President Trump won. So when we talk about revisionist history that we've heard from the Democrats, when we talk about the big lie, their nominee, as recently as last October, was saying the election in 2016 was stolen. They can object to Alabama, they can object to Wyoming, they can object to states when in 2017, but we're somehow not allowed to object to anything. Raise points about the 2020 election. It's not about revisionist history. It's about the double standard the Democrats want to have. That's the part that bothers me the most. And frankly, I think that's what bothers the American people the most. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.